Hello, everybody. Tommy Tables here, and I am with my fellow compatriots, Lou Wasserman's Ghost and Lorn of That Park Place. And today we are going to be presenting a very interesting movie to you. I mean, they've all been interesting movies, I would say, but this one in particular is very interesting because of the fact that the leading man, Tom Hanks, I would argue that this is probably one of the best roles he's ever done. So without further ado, and without keeping you guys in too much suspense, I present to you the subject du jour, the cinematic experience of de rigueur that we must all, you know what, I can't even channel him properly. I'm just gonna throw it up there. Boom, the Ladykillers.
Boom, the Ladykillers. A killer comedy indeed.
A killer comedy, dramedy, murdery. I don't know how do we classify this as a genre?
I think it's more of a caper picture than anything else. The murder part sort of comes in near the end, but it is a comedy caper. And of course, we should mention right off the top, it is a remake. It is an Americanization of a 1955 British movie with Alec Guinness in the part that Tom Hanks does. So I can see Tom Hanks playing that part in America. I can't see Tom Hanks playing Obi-Wan. So,
well, AI may give you the chance to see that.
Oh, God.
So the other thing that I want to point out to you, of course, about this movie is the fact that this is a Coen brothers movie. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because you most likely have seen the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which is probably the one that they're the most well known for. However, their movies have always been special. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. Like, I mean that in the sense that you're in for a treat no matter what it is. It'll be a little bit off the wall, a bit
quirky.
Quirky, that's the word, yes.
Quirky, absolutely.
I was first exposed to them with Blood Simple, which is this wonderfully twisted, strange, beautiful little movie. If you haven't seen that, go see that, everybody. With, what's his name? Emmett Walsh as this sleazy Texas detective in a seersucker coat and a straw hat. And the opening is just his voiceover. And I remember it like it was yesterday. He says, "They say in Russia, everybody shares everything and nobody owns nothing and everybody joins in for the common good." And then he goes, "Well, I don't know about Russia, but this here is Texas. In Texas, you on your own." And that sets the tone for the whole movie of everybody out for themselves. Here's the original.
Yep, there's Obi-Wan looking very smarmy.
Yes, and also Peter Sellers and Herbert Lom, and it's a grand old jaunt.
The Violet Hill Mob.
Yes, exactly.
So
this modern version is a whole nother story because it brings in the whole, what do you call it, iconography of the South and of particularly the sweaty South, I call it, you know, the Memphis and Vicksburg and the Mississippi South. And
where the air is heavy.
And I mean,
yes,
the air is heavy. And I mean, it is such a far cry from the original film, the London aspect of it, that is this, can you say that this is a remake? Like, I mean, it's inspired by almost, I don't know. It's,
well, I know that supposedly Tom Hanks made a point of not watching the original so he wouldn't be affected by it. But I'd say it's technically a remake. Yeah. But it's a inspired by remake.
Oh, so that's where this whole trend of, don't watch or don't read the source material when it comes to things like Marvel movies came from. I see. Interesting.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but I also noticed, I hate to tell you this, guys, because again, it has no relation. There's a Bollywood Ladykillers out there.
There is?
We're not doing it.
So. No, we're not.
God.
I didn't even go look
it's
at it.
It's a double feature for April, isn't it? Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, anyway. So here you see our cast of characters. What's the name of the professor?
Goldthwait.
Goldthwait, yes.
Goldthwait Higginson Dorr, PhD.
So, Lorn, I believe, well, this was one of your suggestions, and I please do us the honors of taking it away on this.
Okay, so part of the reason that we're doing this movie is that I have a particular theory about it. I have always been greatly disappointed that this movie did not get the recognition that I feel that it deserves. And part of that is because I have a very particular theory about this movie. And when I first saw this movie in the theaters, this was 20 years ago. I remember talking to my parents after we had gone to see it because we saw it together. They thought it was an okay movie. And I was raving about it and saying, well, didn't you notice this? And apparently they hadn't. And I sort of thought that all of this stuff was obvious from watching the movie, but nobody that I have ever talked to about this movie has noticed these things. And that has always shocked me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a summary of the movie as it appears. And then I'm going to prosecute my case about what I think the movie is actually about. And then you guys can try and poke holes in it or tell me that I'm stupid, or maybe everybody did notice this and I've just been talking to the wrong people. So we'll see how this goes.
And we should preface this by saying, Lorn, that neither Tommy nor I had actually caught this until we watched it to do this show.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have any preconceptions that it wasn't your theory. We did come into it with your theory in mind.
Yeah. 100%.
I got to tell you, I totally agree with you, right? Up and down the line.
Okay. And the other preface that I want to make, though, is just for the sake of introducing the film. It did come out on March 26, 2004. It had a budget of $35 million, and it returned $76.7 million. So not a smash hit, but it's still, doubled its budget.
And for some reason, when people list which are the weakest Coen brothers movies, this always shows up there. And it's not fair at all to say that. Because putting aside all the things you're about to hear, and I want to hear them, and I'm not trying to get in the way of it. This is just a laugh out loud, funny damn movie. I mean, I literally was laughing out loud at so much of it.
Oh yeah.
So there you go. If you want to just have a good time in your cozy den, put this thing on and laugh.
Yep.
I think the reason that it was viewed as a lesser movie is because if you view it on the surface the way that I'm going to describe it initially, it probably just looks like a paint-by-numbers version of that type of film. And I think they just thought, well, while it is quirky, it didn't seem to do anything special beyond that. And I think that's where I am convinced this subtext is in the movie, and somehow the audience just never saw it. So that's why I wanted to do this picture.
All right, so take it away, Lorn.
So the movie begins with a quiet little police station. You pan down from this heavenly light in the sky and this gospel hymnal that's playing, and you see the interior of this little police station, this jail, where you have the sheriff and his deputy asleep at their desks. It shows that there's this ancient key to the jail cell that's been hanging on this nail that is covered in webs. It's obvious nothing ever happens here. His re-election campaign poster says that, honestly, he's too old to work, so don't turn him out of office. And both of them are asleep. Nothing happens in this town. It is a very quiet, sleepy little place. It looks like heaven on earth. And into this quiet police station bursts a boisterous landlady who wants to swear out a complaint about her neighbor, Wee Mac, who recently went to Pascagoula and bought a boombox, and ever since he came back into town, he's been blasting this hippity hop music, especially this song.
I lost my wallet in El Segundo. It's the name of the song.
And it is
old hippity hop music.
And it has made her so angry, and she's urging the sheriff to do something about it. Now, the sheriff and the deputy, they are clearly familiar with this woman. It's obvious that she comes in and probably swears out a complaint every other week or so, probably about all of her neighbors. And she's talking about how this music, it's not good for this kid's soul, and really what the sheriff ought to do is set an example for him and take an interest in him. Go and have a conversation with him. And the sheriff and the deputy, they are humoring this woman. They're like saying, all right, Marvin, give us all the details. And then she starts to say, it's this music, it's been upsetting Othar too. And the deputy gives the sheriff a look and says, Othar, huh? Yeah, all right. Othar is her deceased husband. And so they believe that she's not entirely all there. But they humor her, and she quietly walks back to her house, which is a beautiful antebellum South house. She sits down and she's talking to the painting of her husband in
Both
the,
are.
yeah, in the living room. She's got all of these candles set up to honor his memory. She's talking to him about how the world has really gone astray and how much she misses him and what a perfect man that he was. And honestly, how she's hoping that when it's her turn to go, that she'll just go quietly and peacefully. And when that happens, there's a flickering of the candles and there is a knock at her door. And when she goes to open the door, there is Tom Hanks as Goldthwait Higginson Dorr, PhD.
In this wonderful kind of Mark Twain-y linen cotton something suit. He looks like something out of another era, and you can sort of see that in that picture. But
He looks like a young Colonel Sanders, like with the hair and everything.
Yes,
he does. And as the door opens, her cat darts out the door and climbs a tree, and she's immediately exhorting him for letting Pickles out and insisting that he go and retrieve her cat. Now, the first thing that you need to know about Hank's character here is that he speaks in a very interesting accent and very eloquently. He is a man of intellect, and he wants everybody to know it. And he is.
Think Truman Capote meets Tom Wolfe.
Yeah. Okay, it's. I love this performance. I don't want to make fun of the performance because honestly, I think it's brilliant.
I'm saying it's marvelous. You know, he's this charming, strange man.
Very
charming
strange.
Snake oil salesman, basically.
His laugh, especially. His laugh just kills me. But he's gently arguing as to whether or not he actually needs to climb the tree to retrieve the cat, and is convinced that yes, he must do so. When she says, "Well, if you're not going to do it, I'm just going to have to call the cops," and he says, "Oh no, I'll retrieve the feline." And as he is,
that's a recurring theme throughout the movie, right? Like where anyway, I please continue.
You mean the avoidance of law enforcement?
No, the avoidance of work up until the pain of law enforcement. Yeah.
So he kind of skedaddles out onto this thin branch for the cat, and naturally the branch gives way under his weight, and he falls to the ground and is knocked unconscious. And he wakes up again in the drawing room to this slightly irritated older lady who is bringing him a cup of tea, which he gratefully accepts. And then eventually, after a small bit of conversation, he asks if she would like to know why he has chosen to darken her door. And it turns out that she has had a sign out front that says that she has a room to let. And he's saying that he is a college professor on sabbatical and that he actually has got a group of people that he would like to bring in that are Renaissance musicians that play music that are inspired by the Gospels that clearly appeal to her. And if he would allow her to let the room, that he believes that she probably has a root cellar, and that would be a nice quiet place where they could practice. And so she agrees to let him let the room. And then we begin to be introduced to these other characters who are variously identified as Gawain, who is sort of a hip-hoppy individual himself, who is working on a casino ship. We are introduced
by Marlon Wayans.
Played by Marlon Wayans. We have Garth Pancake, who is sort of a...
He's a movie prop man, apparently, because we see him at first doing that, or a pyrotechnics guy.
For a commotion.
He's a master of many, many talents, he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And he's
a jack of all trades. But no, he specifically says that he's a master of none of these things, but he's good enough at them.
Yep. And
that's
we have
J.K. Simmons, who you all know as, Spider-Man's boss.
We have the General. And we have a character who is the muscle called Lump, who is a football player who's taken probably way too many knocks.
And the general is a Vietnamese guy who we find out later had experience digging tunnels there.
Yes. And so once all of these people are gathered together, they bring in, it's quite a motley crew. They bring in all of these exotic instruments from the Renaissance period, and they go down into the root cellar, and a map is unveiled and the plot is revealed. This is a heist movie. And Professor Dorr had solicited these people for an enterprise because, as it happens in this state, gambling is not allowed on land, but it is allowed by riverboat. And so the inside man, Coen, happens to work as custodial staff at the counting house where the money is deposited after the riverboat docks. And so the idea is this counting house is adjacent to this landlady's property. They plan to tunnel from her root cellar to the counting house, drill through the doors, steal the funds, actually repair the wall, and
so the
make off.
Money is a mystery. Nobody knows how it got out of there, so they will have time to get away.
It is a classic heist film. And so the idea is they have to conduct all of this activity under the watchful eye of this landlady and hopefully not get caught. Also, while pretending to perform this chamber music in her root cellar. And so the plot progresses about as you would expect. There are the details of preparing everything to bore the tunnel and run lights down there and get through the wall and all of that stuff.
It's kind of the Great Escape on steroids as far as the tunneling is concerned. And they keep bringing the dirt out in hefty bags. And you forgot about maybe the most interesting, important, non-human character in the show. There is a bridge over the river, and there is a barge that nightly goes under this bridge on the way to a big sort of trash island where all the seagulls are. And so they time it so that they're standing there over the bridge to drop the bags of dirt onto the barge so that they can go away and not be traced.
And that barge's schedule is like every 5 minutes, it feels.
Yeah, it's pretty frequent, but there's a lot of trash being generated.
Yeah.
And indeed, when you said the first scene of the movie is really showing you this bridge, and that this relatively modern bridge has these kind of 16th, 14th century gargoyles on the posts of it that all the birds are crapping on and flying down to the barge to get their spoils. And that will happen into the plot later down the road.
Yeah, and so there are various points at which they are almost discovered, but they always manage to come up with a plausible lie or some way to explain what's going on under the suspicious eye of this landlady. But after they have actually successfully completed the heist, she does manage to see, when there is a demolitions mishap, that there's lots of money that's flying around down in the root cellar, and she demands an explanation after a brief social event. And so Dora attempts to spin a story, and she seems almost to buy it, but then says, no, I think I'm going to have to turn you in. You're either going to have to do that, or you're going to have to replace the money and come with me to church.
This was after she looked at the portrait of her dear departed husband, by the way.
Yeah, and he had spun a very convincing story about exactly how and why they were doing this.
I believed it.
in any case, this proves to be unacceptable to the group, and so they decide, well, we're just going to have to kill the lady. And there's various hijinks that are involved in that too, because nobody really wants to do it, but somehow they have to figure out who's going to be the person, how it's going to take place. And then through happenstance and other various things, each of them meets their own untimely end. And
gets dumped off the bridge onto the barge heading for the trash.
Yes, there's a recurring theme of them returning to the bridge to dump a body into it as each one of them passes away. And at the end of the thing, she essentially ends up with the money, and that's the end of the movie. And so I think this is maybe part of why it was considered unsatisfying, is most heist movies, if you look at this as a generic heist movie, the folks that are planning the heist, they get away with it. In this case, they didn't. And so what you're left with is the comedy, which is quirky and funny, but as a heist movie, it probably felt kind of paint by the numbers. We've all seen these things where you have this plot to go into wherever the counting room is, take the money.
And a lot of tunneling movies that we've seen too, so it wasn't that unique in that respect.
Yeah,
picture Ocean's 11, but everyone's dead by the end of it.
And with no twist. I think that's probably the thing that
That's
I think
true. Yeah.
Well,
made people think.
what's funny is the twists are all through the movie, but you have to know the context. For example, when she's talking about their medieval music and then maybe they'd like to come play at the church, of course, they really don't play. All of these instruments are fake. They're
Right.
playing a tape recording. So Tom Hanks is trying to make an excuse. He says, well, I don't know, this may not be music your church would like, because a lot of it, basically, he says, is Catholic. And she says, well, we don't care about denominations. She said, we even had a Jew come down with a guitar and play. Well, what if you know the history of the South and that is Bob Dylan actually toured the South playing gospel churches. There's other things in it that are like, if you know that she's a big donor to Bob Jones University,
Yeah.
which in real life
It's
was
a great
bigoted
gag.
as hell and didn't allow interracial dating or anything else. Yet she's sending them money every month. So there's all these little twists on the reality of the South versus the idyllic vision of the South, with the magnolias and the antebellum houses and all the rest of it. So maybe the movie was smarter than The Room as far as the audience was concerned to some degree.
So now I'm going to prosecute my case and say what the movie I believe is actually about. And I'm telling you, it's not a heist movie.
Hit us, Lorn.
It's a religious parable. And Tom Hanks is literally, not figuratively, he is literally playing the devil, Satan himself. And I have taken copious notes, so I'm going to lay out my case. I will read you what I have, because I took notes throughout this whole movie to illustrate
Counselor,
my case.
you may proceed.
What I wrote down was introduction, gazing up at the heavens, a hymnal under, Let's Go Back to God, which is the song that plays at the beginning. And ironically, that's sort of what's going to happen to everybody in this movie. Pan down to tortured-looking gargoyles in trash barges and Trash Island. Fade to sheriff's office, which clearly doesn't get much use. Landlady swears out complaint regarding Wee Mac and his boombox. Sheriff and deputy clearly familiar with her. Then she's back at her house, and I was talking about how she wants to go to sleep and wake up in the glory land. As soon as she makes that wish, an ill wind causes the candle to flicker and darken as the devil approaches. Mm-hmm. The cat senses his presence and rears and growls in warning. Pickles flees when the door is opened. Now, little bit of history here. There was a point in time during around the time of the Black Plague when there was a belief that cats were minions of the devil, particularly black cats, and so there was a pogrom against them, and they were killed. That led to a rat explosion, which did ironically lead to the Black Plague and millions of deaths.
And by the way, that barge could be the Monty Python Bring Out Your Dead barge almost.
And so the cat would be very aware of what he is, because essentially the devil caused the death of many of their kin. Of course, he's dressed in white. The devil is made to appear beautiful and eloquent and persuasive, angelic even. And so, of course, that's how he is dressed. Handsome of look, eloquent of tongue. He does not want the police involved. The cat knows what he is. Then, as he's talking about his education, he says that he has a mastery of antique languages, Latin and Greek, and I added, and no doubt Sumerian, Akkadian, Hebrew, etc.
And you forgot that your description of this town is someplace where nothing ever happens and everything's pretty. It's the Garden of Eden, and here comes the snake.
It is. And so she offers to let him view some religious literature, to which he sort of recoils and says he's definitely not right now, perhaps after his headache has eased, because he's not interested in reading any of that. When he asks if she would like to know why he has come to darken her door, the expression often is that the devil has come to darken your door. He's giving a hint himself. He appeals to Mrs. Munson by claiming to play church music because he knows that she'll be interested in that. And she says, gospel music? And he says, well, inspired by the gospel. Usually played in crypts and catacombs. Not necessarily gospel music, but maybe gospel adjacent. Then we have a sermon. We have a sermon at her church where they're talking about Moses coming down from Sinai and finding the Israelites worshiping the golden calf, and warns that God smote those sinners. Well, that's exactly what their whole plot is about. They're after this filthy lucre at the counting house for the barge. They are worshiping this gold, and they're going to pay the price for doing so. And of course, the crew itself, all of these plotters, they're transported to and fro in a hearse. When Dor is trying to talk to her about, when he's explaining what they're actually doing and why they're doing it, he describes, in religious terms, of course, the riverboat gambling palace as the Sodom of the Mississippi Delta, trying to work her over to his side. And there's a song that's playing under some of this stuff while they're walking back and forth that is Troubles of This World, one verse of which is the devil's in this world. It is explicitly pointing to the fact that that's what he's doing. And I would posit that Dor's actual goal isn't the gold at all, and it's not even the conspirators. I believe his entire purpose in being here is to try and tempt and lead astray Mrs. Munson, the landlady.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
He wants to corrupt her because the other guys were already corrupt. They've already fallen.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And she is mildly tempted at a certain point, but in looking at her guardian angel, her fallen husband Othar, she remains...
Whose face keeps changing expression throughout the film.
Yes.
She remains in her faith and is protected. I also made a note. I said, don't forget, the Trash Island has already been allegorically linked to hell through the sermon. When the bodies are dumped on the trash barge later, this is them being carried to the underworld.
Right. It's the river Styx.
Yep. And there is a moment... There's a quiet moment that takes place between Dor and Mrs. Munson, where he's reading, and she talks about how he's constantly reading, and he talks about this comfort that all of these ancient books give to him. He is constantly quoting and referencing Poe, and she starts talking about the good book, and he goes, yes, the good book. I have found solace in its pages, but there are many other good books, as the devil would. And then later on, while trying to convince his co-conspirators to murder Mrs. Munson, he starts partially quoting the Communist Manifesto, from each according to his abilities, and so on.
Oh, I missed that part. Wow.
Yeah, but I think my favorite part, and I think the linchpin to this for me, is when he is almost certain that she is going to turn him in, when he actually really does try to tempt her. He has spun this story about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And she's saying, no, I'm going to have to call the cops. He attempts to tempt Mrs. Munson with the truth. And that is exactly how the devil would operate with a silver tongue. He says he's calling out this den of iniquity, this gambling palace, this painted harlot of the bandit queen, appealing to everything that would sound good to her.
He's making himself sound like Robin Hood, essentially.
Like he's doing a righteous task. What he tells her is that, look, this gambling palace, it's insured. And we have done the math, and we have found out that for all the policyholders that they have, the amount that they will have to contribute to cover the loss is just one single solitary penny. Just 1 penny. And she says, 1 penny? 1 penny. And we have determined that this money that we have taken, we're going to donate to all of these charitable causes. And now that you are involved in this, that we would be happy to forward a share to the charity of your choice, even Bob Jones University. So he does very nearly succeed. I do believe that Mrs. Munson was his goal. But when that could not occur, he had to settle for these remaining souls. And as it happens, because she had been true and faithful, had lived in her faith, even though it may be somewhat misguided with regards to Bob Jones University, she was protected from every one of their schemes. I think my favorite
Not just
line.
protected. Each one of them, as they try to kill her, winds up dead.
Yes, but I think my very favorite line, and the thing that absolutely sells it for me, is when she is offering him the alternative of returning all of the money and accompanying her to church on Sunday. Dorr is so offended. He says, "And engage in divine worship?" That is the most offensive thing that has ever been said to him, and his reaction is priceless. I think the only potential flaw in my theory is Lump, because Lump determines he can't go through with killing the lady, and in fact tries to stop Dorr from doing so. Now, he had engaged in the plot up to that point, but he hadn't actually done anything except shovel dirt for the tunnel. And so I think that is a weak point in my theory. But besides that, the only other evidence that I would offer to you is that throughout this entire plot, Dorr does nothing to advance it. He is the one who called for the people to join in this plot. He offers the temptation to them, but he carries out absolutely none of the steps. And so at the end of the thing, the way this goes off is that Lump is killed because he attempts to shoot Dorr, but there isn't a bullet chambered in the first chamber. And he ends up looking at the gun himself, pulling the trigger and killing himself, falling over the end of the bridge, landing in the trash barge. And then some of the ravens overhead land on one of the gargoyles. The gargoyle's head is loose. It falls down, conks Dorr in the head, who also falls down, but he does not immediately go into the trash barge. Instead, he is suspended between heaven and hell. He is the Lord of the earth. He's in between. And while his jacket does eventually rip, his body falls down. His cloak ascends into the heavens with the ravens to go off and seek his next victims.
Or it could be his wings being clipped.
That's one other, but my take on it is the devil is always in the world. He's always going to be tempting. So
this was a shell he was using this time. He will move on to another one down the road.
Yep.
Anyway.
There's my theory. Feel free to poke holes in it.
I have no holes to poke. I will only say to those out there listening to this, that's all fascinating, and the movie works anyway without it.
Yeah.
Which is one of the great things about it. I think that's one of the things that they do. The Coen brothers, they work on many levels of meaning and of plotting, and damn, they make fun pictures. They're always fun. Sometimes they're funnier, and sometimes they're just offbeat funny. But
there's one additional caveat that I forgot to bring up at the very end of the movie. After his death, Mrs. Munson tries to return the money to the sheriff's station.
Yes, they just ignore her.
Because they think that she's a loon. They don't believe her. And so she was devout in her faith even that far to try and return the money. And they told her, why don't you just keep it? Because they don't believe she has the money. And she says, I could keep it? Sure, why not? Go ahead and keep it.
And she says, if I want to give it to Bob Jones? And he's absolutely, go for it.
That'd be real nice, I think.
Anything to get her out of the office and let them get on with doing nothing.
Yep.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's basically she's getting her just rewards for maintaining her moral conviction and not falling prey to temptation. And she's also been given the authority by the authorities to keep the stolen goods. Because once they tell her, keep that money, it's no longer, we're splitting hairs here, but she's been given the moral authority to keep that money. The one question that I have though for you, Lauren, is what is the symbolism of the cat Pickles running all the way to the bridge at the end of the movie and throwing the finger into the barge?
Yeah, we didn't explain that during their explosive attempts, Simmons blows his finger off and the cat runs off with it.
That was the most hilarious part of the movie.
I don't think it's necessarily important to the plot, other than the fact that it's like, first of all, keeping the mortal remains together, and secondly, the cat being aware of where this needs to go.
Yes. Every last little bit of them needs to go to the trash.
That's a fair point. Yep.
And it's a topper. What are you going to do after he dies? This is what you're going to do. Now, there's certain conventions you have to just follow as a storyteller.
Yeah, this has always been kind of I'm not generally a Coen brothers movie fan. There's only a couple of their movies that I actually like. The one is one of them, though, and I've always loved it, and I always felt like somehow it just never gelled with the audience. And when I talk to people about it, it's like they never seem to see that symbolism that I was seeing, and so I thought it was worthy of talking about.
You know what? I love it. And I went into this movie with that context because you'd explained it a little bit to us about a week or so ago. And it really, I can see both sides of it. Like if you went into this movie thinking that it was just everything being presented to you at face value, yeah, you might leave the theater and think, wow, that kind of really resolved itself way too neatly. You know, that just like, what? Like you might leave it kind of feeling a little not that enthused. But when you go into it looking at that symbolism and with this interpretation that you've hit on, Lorn, it's just great.
Yeah, I think audiences may have just felt that it was anticlimactic, and that just breaks my heart.
Yeah, you might be right that they just felt it wasn't resolved to their satisfaction at the end, that they enjoyed the trip and wound up going nowhere, or what they perceived as nowhere at the end.
Yeah, I think what they wanted was a successful heist, but the actual point of the movie is the immolation of these evil people.
And there's so many. The other thing about this movie we should mention is that everybody in it, I mean, all of these other characters that pass through, the guy who's the manager of the casino, who's so wonderfully corrupt.
Stephen Root.
Stephen Root, yeah.
And the sheriff and his assistant, George Wallace, of course, as the sheriff. And also a lady named Diane Delano as Mr. Pancake, J.K. Simmons' girlfriend, whose name is Mountain Girl in the movie. And it turns out he suffers from irritable bowel syndrome, and he met her at an IBS singles weekend. Just this crazy stuff. And as I mentioned to you guys, I saw her before she ever got in the movies. She was the kind of main character, hostess, whatever, at the Western Stunt Show at Universal Studios Hollywood as this kind of rock'em sock'em mountain girl. So there you go, mountain girl. And then we even have a cameo during this scene where Simmons is making a commercial for Bruce Campbell, of all people. There's just a lot of fun stuff happening all through this. It's got texture. It's got
Greg Gruenberg was the director too.
Yeah. And also you really feel like you can feel the heat and the humidity. And in fact, the street where the house is and the exterior of the house, that's all in the Universal backlot in Hollywood on this thing called Colonial Street, which is where all of you might know it from the movie The Burbs or from, among other houses that are there. They at one point in Universal, they decided to build that street, and they picked up all the various residential houses from around the lot and moved them there. And one of them is the house from the Munsters. Everybody uses that street. But they put in all of these extra Spanish moss and magnolia trees and made it this jungle that is so rich and fragrant. I also noticed they built the interior of the casino in a disused furniture store in Glendale, California. The magic of the movies.
How'd you put that together?
Well, they just had a big empty space. The exterior of the casino is, of course, a real one from, I think, from Mobile or one of those places. But they changed the name, and of course they CGI'd the parking lot empty because in the plot it's important that the place closes. The real casinos are open 24/7, so they had to have an empty parking lot instead of a full one. So they just took all the cars out. The magic of the movie. I noticed. I didn't notice in the opening scene, but in the closing scene when she goes to the sheriff's office, there's this big dog asleep on the steps that she just walked around. And it's just this place where nothing happens and nobody matters that cares that it doesn't happen. And the gospel stuff in the church, and it creates a place that is, on the one hand, stereotype, but on the other hand, feels very, very real, and you feel like you could go to that place Oh, and then they took what looks like a Denny's or something and made it the waffle place, which is a take on of course Waffle House. But it's just fun stuff, folks. It's just a lot of fun.
So the one
we've probably told you too much, but we had to explain all of this subtext, and it won't spoil the movie for you, I don't think.
You know, Lorn, your theory is brilliant, and like I said, I can't believe no one else has sort of picked up on that, because it really ties everything together. And the Coen brothers films do sometimes have, you know, supernatural elements to them, right? Like, it's not out of the ordinary, and so you would almost expect that, especially at the beginning of the film when the candle kind of gets snuffed out right before Tom Hanks appears.
Well, that was one of the things that baffled me, is that it's like when I talk to people about this who have seen the movie, to me, it was kind of blatant about it. There's all this religious iconography all over the place, and the gospel music and the characters and their portrayals. It's like, to me, it seemed obvious, but nobody that I ever...
The painting changing his expressions as well. Like, you can clearly see that the painting of her dead husband is protecting her.
But nobody that I have ever talked to has ever apparently picked up on it. And so I that's kind of why I wanted to pitch it to you guys and see, am I crazy?
No.
Well, one...
you may be crazy in some ways we don't understand, but not about this.
So the one sort of question that I have, and you kind of touched on it as well, Lorn, is the character of Lump. So going back a little bit, Tom Hanks does say at one point that he had placed a classified ad, and that's how he had ended up recruiting everybody, because they had answered his ad, including Lump. But I mean, if you had to ask me, I don't think Lump is even capable of reading. Like, he's that stupid.
No, but that's overthinking the whole thing. I mean, it's like, I think the whole point of the classified ad thing was that they didn't know each other before, and they weren't a gang that was doing other jobs, but they'd come together just for this instance. So
I'm actually not sure that he's as stupid as he appears either, because he's the one guy at the Waffle House where they're all arguing because Gawain has lost his job because he was being stupid. He's their inside guy, and they really need him there, and they're trying to figure out, how do we get him employed again? And Lump keeps interrupting. He says, Professor, what is it, Lump? Why don't we just bribe the guy? Nobody had thought of it, you know? So,
and by the way, that statement makes him worthy of corruption by the devil, etc. too, because till then he's kind of an innocent victim of the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a fair point, actually.
To me, though, that feels like a minor sin for death as the reward.
Well, it just shows that he's corruptible. I'll put it that way. But
and I mean, there's also the fact, of course, that he did not protest to the killing of
Mrs. Munson.
To Mrs. Munson,
the lady killing.
But he did. That's exactly.
He said he couldn't do it.
No. But up to that point, he was going along with it. He was drawing the straws. Like, he didn't. You know, if he were truly a moral character, he would have said flat out right at the beginning, no, we cannot do this. Like, absolutely not.
Well, like I said, I do feel like this is the potential flaw in my theory, and so to take it however you want. I do think that he did participate. He volunteered for the thing to start with, but I think part of the reason I give him a little bit of an out is because we don't see how he joined the group. What we do see is that he screwed up in football. And like you, I agree. I'm not sure he'd be reading a classified ad, but it wouldn't surprise me if somebody read it for him and said, why don't you check this out?
Yeah.
With him not really knowing what it's about.
That makes sense. I think we're overthinking it. Look, it's a movie. There's a store in Hollywood that sells all kinds of production supplies. I think of the name of it. But anyway, he used to sell a little button that said, it's only TV or it's only movies. And we would wear those on the set. So
there you go. So let's dig into this a little bit more. I think, Lorn, you've given us a fantastic theory. I love it. Like if not for this theory, I probably would have felt similar to, some of the critique out there about this being just not that great of a film. But when you add that layer on top of it, and there are enough of these shots throughout the film that you really have to think that it was intentional, that this was what the Coens were trying to get at. Like, when Tom Hanks dies, when his cloak goes flying in the wind, like the lingering shots of that, when he gets taken out by like a gargoyle, one of his own minions, like the symbolism of always like these barges going by every 5 minutes, taking like everything to essentially hell, like the framing of it, it just, yeah, like I have no doubt.
It's kind of like Charybdis and the River Styx.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, that's. But the other thing about the reception of this movie, first of all, if I'd never heard any of this, Lorn, I still would have enjoyed the movie. It's just plain funny.
Yeah.
Second of all, I'm reading a line in the Wikipedia page that says, "The Ladykillers received mixed reviews, and many critics consider it one of the Coen brothers' weaker efforts, negatively comparing it to the British classic." How many people do you think ever saw the British movie and watched this movie in the theaters in America? Slim to none is my answer. So the idea that it failed by comparison is nonsense. It has to, and when you're making a remake, unless it's something that shouldn't be remade, which they do a lot nowadays. I mean, remake Casablanca, would you remake African Queen? I don't think so. But you can't depend on the other people watching the movie having seen the first one. You just have to make a movie in its own right. And I think they did.
Very much so. So Lou, what if I may ask you, what was your favorite part of the film? What was the part that you found the weakest?
I think my favorite thing about this movie, aside from the wonderfully verbose and colorful dialogue, especially from Tom Hanks' character, is the way it sets the scene. The way you get, like I say, you can smell the sweat in that town, and everybody's fat, and everybody's hot, and everybody's humid, and everybody's. It creates a world that I know better now that I live sort of in the South, but that I knew of, but wouldn't have identified with as well, and they did that perfectly. The weakest thing might be there's maybe a little too much gospel music and a little too much church ladies and a little too much of that whole part of the movie. I think it becomes a distraction at some points. Those scenes in the church where everybody's singing, the choir and everything, they're great, but they could have been greater if they were half as long.
Yeah.
But it's a relatively short movie anyway, but it becomes, in other words, when you put her in that scene, it takes away from her.
Yeah.
This movie's about her. And when you make her just one of many, she doesn't stand out as strong the way she does at the beginning when she's talking to them about the hip hop music. So I think that tried too hard as far as giving her a context that she didn't need, because we knew who she was from the moment we saw her.
Right. Like in my case, I would say the thing that my favorite part of the film was when J.K. Simmons blows his finger off. Like, just the comedic timing of it was brilliant. And I mean, everything about it, like Tom Hanks's facial expressions, when they come up afterwards and they're like, "Professor, there's blood," like it was just, I had to rewind that and watch it a few times because I was just laughing my sides off. Weakest part of the film, the character of Lump confounded me a little bit. Like, he had his moments. I just felt that he was played up to be, it was just, it almost felt like too much of a dumb character at some points. Like, I don't know. Like, there were times.
When I think of big, muscular character actors of the past, I think how much better, for example, Mike Mazurki would have been in this, or even how much better a Ted Cassidy, or this guy. I mean, he's a fine actor. He's done a lot of other things, but it's like he's a guy playing a stupid guy. He's not a stupid guy.
Yeah,
it's just got a level of artificiality to him that doesn't quite play.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It didn't sell like the character didn't really get sold to me very much. But that's a minor criticism.
And by the way, if we admit that she has intelligence, she could possibly buy all these other guys as people who play these strange instruments. This guy,
Yeah.
not for a second. Not for a second.
True enough. Well, now, what about you, Lauren? Any sort of closing thoughts on this?
I would just say I think this is one of Tom Hanks' top 3 performances for me.
The other
100%.
two being
His character in Road to Perdition and Woody from Toy Story.
You're not going to say Castaway?
No, I actually am not a huge fan of Castaway. It was
Me
impressive
neither.
for the achievement of what he did, but it was not a movie that I liked.
Wilson. No.
Yeah, it was a one note, and that's not a good thing if you're a stranded on an island movie. After we get it, we've got it, and the whole thing with Wilson. Well, anyway, that's another movie. But I agree with you. Anyway, onwards.
And so
you were
Lauren,
telling us, yeah,
you were kind of giving us your sort of closing thoughts on this.
Oh, just that. I think that this is, I think it's probably one of his lesser known works, and I consider it one of his best performances. And I love watching his character. These little, his laugh just kills me. His nervousness and his solicitousness, the silver tongue. It's my favorite portrayal of the devil on screen, and I just love it.
You know, one thing I would say about it is that, for me at least, in a lot of the movies that Tom Hanks is in, he does a very good job. He's a great actor, obviously, but at the end of the day, you're looking at him and he's still Tom Hanks, basically, right? This film, I forgot that he was Tom Hanks, and I had to remind myself a couple of times. I was like, oh yeah, that's Tom Hanks, right? Because he just pulls it off so well. The facial expressions, like everything, like it's just, yeah, very, very well done.
well, they gave him a script that you could dig into and consume and chew up and have fun with. And not, as a director, he said with a smile, it's easy to take people down a notch if they're over. It's really hard to bring them up. This is a movie where he could go as far as he wanted to go with this guy, with the whole eloquent con man brilliance. And you couldn't go too far. You couldn't go too far. Because since she's not going to really buy it anyway, it doesn't matter if anybody else buys it, because the other guys are there for the money, honey, not for his charm. And he is amusing himself, this guy, by talking this way and being this way and wearing that outfit. God, the clothes. The clothes. It just instantly, you just sit there going, what riverboat did he step off of from 100 years ago,
Well, this is kind of, it's the vanity of Lucifer,
Exactly.
He has to be a pretty thing that has these eloquent words. And another thing, while they're having that conversation about ancient texts in the good book, the line that always goes through my head is that no one can quote the Bible like the devil, and
fair point.
That I always think is what sells the part to me, is that he's obviously uncomfortable with the subject, but he's also very familiar with it.
But I just want to stress again to everybody watching this is one damn laugh out loud, funny, fun movie without the context, which I think it has.
Yeah.
And by the way, Lauren, go back and watch the 55. You'll never see that. That's all the Coen brothers in this movie. And that's a fun movie too.
I did notice in the trailer for the 55 version, though, they do talk about it being a demoniac plot.
Yes.
And so they were trying to at least allude to that these are bad guys.
By the same token, in 55, there were a lot more people who knew the Bible and were more religious than there are now, too. So, Anyway, we're at the end of our hour of joy. And do we want a sneak preview of next time or not? I don't know. Let's leave it in everybody's imaginations and just let you know we have several wonderful movies. We're getting suggestions all the time
that are amazing,
which are great. In fact, we talked about 3 of them before we started tonight that definitely are going to make the list. And if you like movies, stick around, because we're going to tell you about a lot of them that are special and unique and worthy of your time, most importantly.
And are worth the watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Which you may only think you understand. And I will say next time we're going a lot harder edged, but with some really, really, really wonderful the edge is worth it. And after that, 2 times from now, a very special guest genre guy. And beyond that, we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4 ready already, and more to come. So keep coming back for more. And thank you very much. And we're here to broaden your horizons, but we're not talking down to anybody. We're sharing our pleasures with you.
100%. And likewise, echoing Lou's sentiment of thank you for your continued support. We hope you're enjoying this type of content that's being created. We're doing it for you and to support Pro, to support Jonas, to support everybody. And so it's a real honor to be able to do this. So grateful that you guys are watching this. Thank you for the engagement, the feedback. Please, please, please keep it coming. And we shall see you in about a week or so.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on 23PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WDW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.